Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We are here to talk about embracing the construction cloud and streamlining compliance with New England LPAs and AECs. I'll be your host today. My name is Adam DeWitowitz. I'm a senior manager for construction technology with Infotech, and in my role here, I function as a subject matter expert on construction inspection and construction technology. And I also hold a CCM from CMAA. In my last role as manager for CE&I at BL Companies in Connecticut, I was responsible for rolling APIA out and acting as the administrator for the system for all of the projects. I've spent over 25 years in construction, 15 of which have been directly in construction inspection and construction oversight of projects for state, municipal, and utility clients in Connecticut and the southern New England region. So with us today, we have a panel as well. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself?
I should unmute first. There we go. Thanks, Adam. Yes, good morning. My name's Pete Shermer. I am a principal project manager at the aforementioned BL companies. One of the things I did was I took over the administration of our APIA system from Adam after he started it. Great move. I'm co-manager of a staff of, including myself, we have 9 inspectors. I've been in construction as well as roadway and bridge design for over 25 years. And right now, my primary role is to manage the inspection staff and help them out where needed, and also to maintain all of our inspection documentation.
Great, thank you, Peter. Howard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Howard Weisberg. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for the City of Middletown. Was previously the Director of Public Works in Meriden. I actually started doing e-construction through a state of Connecticut transportation grant for improving paperless construction, and we came across APIA, started utilizing it, and continued to utilize it after the pilot.
Great, thank you, Howard. And Brian.
Hi, good morning. My name is Brian Ennis. I'm the city engineer in Meriden, Connecticut. Prior to working with the city, I was working for a geotechnical consultant, so I was doing a lot of field inspections as well, generating a lot of the paper that I'm trying to get rid of right now. Meriden's an old city. We have a lot of records in our office, and frankly, we don't have room to put any more stuff in here. So we're always looking for ways that we can reduce the amount of paperwork that the office generates and that we have to retain.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you to the panel for being here. So some housekeeping before we get started. For today's presentation, you will be muted. However, I do want to encourage you to use the Q&A feature. You will see that button titled Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We'll address any questions you have during the Q&A session at the end. If for any reason today you have to leave today's presentation, or you would like to rewatch or share the presentation, we will be sending out a recording of the discussion once we have it available, as well as a Q&A sheet that'll have answers to any questions that we may not get to today. So we'll have a lot to cover in our time together today. We're going to kick things off with our moderated panel. I'll have some questions for our panelists that center around things like what inefficiencies their teams were facing and how the implementation of APIA helped solve some of those challenges. We'll also talk about the efficiencies to be gained using cloud-based PMIS softwares like APIA, how those systems enhance transparency and accessibility for other stakeholders. And finally, we'll touch on current and future integrations of those systems and APIA, specifically with what would be viewed as traditional land survey tools as a way to enhance the effectiveness and capability of field inspectors. And so with that, let's dive into our discussion today. So for the panel, and I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to come to Peter first. Peter, what challenges of paper-based record keeping have been most prevalent with the projects that you've worked on over the years?
Adam, I'd say, as Howard alluded to, Brian alluded to earlier, there's a lot of paper. And if it's generally stored in the construction field office, and really everything's stored in one location, hard copies, and just getting out there to review things on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, or to, check computations or written reports. It's, I don't want to say a logistical nightmare, but it can be challenging. So, having to review paper records really poses some challenges for review as well as storage. And one of the projects I'm working on now, it's gone way over on time. So if the contractor files a claim, for example, now we're rifling through 1,200 days of daily written reports on paper. And I think, in this case, for example, it would really cut down on the time of finding things that we need them if it were in a cloud-based system like Appia.
Yeah, great. I totally understand you there, having worked with you in this industry as long as you have. Certainly the single storage area and the risk, as you talked about, with it being in a construction field trailer. We all know most projects require some type of fire file, but that doesn't always mean that the documents are protected from other types of risks either. Brian, how about you? What type of challenges have you seen as as an owner when it comes to the paper-based record keeping?
Well, the main issue that we've had is with the MSAT jobs where you have to do the 4 books. That's all you have. If anything happens to one of those records, it's pretty much it's very difficult to recreate it. You're an office break-in or a spilled cup of coffee away from losing 6-7 months worth of work. Right now, if using a system like this, everything is stored in a secure location. If the construction office gets broken into by somebody looking to make a quick buck, we're not losing anything.
Sure. Yeah, and we talk, sometimes we hear, in the news about even things like, cyber criminals with things like, ransomware attacks. And we're gonna touch on this a little more, the risks of, whether it be paper-based or, those types of things, whether you're using even scanned or just spreadsheet, right, paper-based systems. There's a lot of different inherent risks that come with that. So let me pivot for a moment then. How has your implementation of Appia, Brian, solved some of those challenges? What's the benefit to you of using a system like Appia?
Well, the primary benefit is the lack of having to have everything in hard copy. The main project that we are using Appia on right now, it's a flood control project. We're about 19-20 months into it. We've got another 6 or 7 months left to go, and this would probably be 2-3 full file drawers of paperwork if we had done everything paper. As I said earlier, we don't have the room to store all this paper, and because we're a municipality, we're not allowed to throw anything away. Once it comes in the office, there's retention laws that say we have to keep it for a certain amount of time, which means we need someplace to put it. If we never print it off, then we don't have to find a place to put it.
Right, exactly. And that's, towns and municipalities in particular, I know have, more and more, it seems they've got limited and more and more limited space when it comes to not only file storage, but if you're storing things like in a town vault, those vaults have already got a lot of records in them. And, me personally, having been in Meriden vault, which has a lot of the land records in it, and the engineering records, they fill up fast, to your point. And, as we touched on before, having a system that's cloud-based, I think also, kind of tackles the ransomware issue, in that you brought something up before. The records are reproducible, right, out of Appia. And that's always a positive benefit over using either paper or digitized paper. Peter, how about you? How has Appia solved some of the challenges, for you at BL as an AEC firm, overseeing projects in terms of getting off of paper?
It's I'll be honest up front and I'll say I'm old school and like reviewing things on paper too, but you can always print it if you want to go that route. But I think the whole the logistics are made a lot simpler. If I need to spend an hour one way to drive to a site and review a DWR or some computations, that's 2 hours out of that day of lost time. And for the inspectors too, if you have a contractor works late, you've got a paving day, they're out there 10, 11 hours. The last thing they want to do is write their paving report. They want to go home, grab a bite and, go to bed. And on the other hand, a lot of the inspectors I work with, they're really, they're, they like their jobs and they want to get the work done. So they can go home and then log in from home and type up the report before they forget all the details of what happened during the day, or do it the next morning with a cup of coffee. So, I think that the universal access, the global access to what you need to do, I think is huge.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Just going a little further on that, Peter, what kind of time and cost savings do you think you have seen with, using Appia on projects versus the paper-based or digitized paper methods?
Well, going back to that previous example, getting down to Westport for that little bridge job we had, it was a small job, town administered. So our fees were somewhere in the $150,000 range. Now, if I have to drive down there once a week, 2 hours plus my work time, if I save 2 hours a week over a month or over a 6-month project, let's assume it's a 6-month project, over 6 months, that's about $9,000 in savings. And I mean, compare that to the 150,000 fees. If something goes wrong and the project goes longer, that $9,000 could go a long way, in cost savings to the town. We wouldn't have to increase our fees necessarily. So I think, 10,000 over a 6-month project on a smaller project can be significant.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. In driving to Westport or anywhere in Fairfield County in Connecticut in an hour is probably on a good day, right? I mean, most people in
Yep.
the area know it can take upwards of an hour and a half or 2 hours to go just a short distance in that area. Let me come to Howard. Howard, when you implemented Appia in Meriden when you were there, what kind of time and cost savings did you guys notice on projects?
I think the big one is our inspectors were actually spending more time inspecting and not in the office downloading photos or developing photos or putting photos into a photo library and then trying to annotate it. Everything that used to be a little class project is done instantaneously in the field. There's no need to type text in and explain a photo after you've downloaded it into some other format. It all gets handled automatically in Mobile Inspector and speech to text. The great thing was, there was really no time having to contact somebody and find it out. We just popped into Appia, see what happened that day, looked at the photos, read the description, and knew. And it took no effort from the contractor to do it once they realized that they had that ability to do it. There was a learning curve just trying to, it's incredibly simple, but for some reason the contractors, the inspectors kept thinking it was incredibly hard. So once that we explained to them speech to text, take a photo, speech to text, everything's located, you're all set. Just the ease of not having to waste anybody's time to find out what was going on was phenomenal.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to touch on advantages here in a minute. I want to just pivot to Brian with this last question. Brian, in the project is the municipal side administrator. What kind of time or cost savings have you really noticed out of using Appia?
Well, I mean, as a municipality, all my projects are in town, so I don't have the travel and the going back and forth between the job sites like Pete has to deal with. But at the same time, if you want to stay on top of what's going on in the field, and if you're, we got a lot of things that we're doing here, and I can't always get away to run out to the job every time I want to. So just being able to go get in and look at things and track what the inspectors are seeing sitting in my office, I can do that in 15 minutes while I'm drinking my coffee in the morning, as opposed to having to get in the car, drive out and find out where they're working, and check in with the contractor. And it's a time saver when honestly we don't always have the time.
Yeah, it's a great point. So to Peter's point, just a few hours a week of just his time can add up to a substantial amount when you cumulatively take your time, Peter's time, as Howard's talking about, making more efficiency out of time that's otherwise spent traveling back and forth to a field office, be it an inspector, be it yourself, or between projects. Just aggregating all of that efficiency together can really make a big impact on a project's budget and a project's bottom line. And it sounds to me like, frankly, at the end of the day, that might be the difference between having to dip into extra work if you do run long, or you do have a situation that requires additional inspection effort, versus having budget left that's been preserved simply through the efficiencies that are gained, through APIA. I want to touch on something that, Howard, you were just talking about, and I'm going to come back to you. And that was, the speech to text, the photo abilities in APIA. What are some of the advantages, maybe besides that, that APIA has, that you've seen, and what are the types of things that you'd like to see it be able to do, or maybe some of the new things that it does that are things that give it advantages?
Honestly, we found the photos and speech to text the low hanging fruit that created automatic return on investment, just because it was so easy. I mean, if it did nothing else, I mean, we'd actually been in the office going, if it did nothing else than this, it's still a value. And then, it's a tiny little piece of the project, but, just being able to do the daily reports as a copy feature, and just modify it. I mean, everybody hates doing the daily reports, but they have to be accurate. Being able to do it in essentially 5 minutes in the field and only do it once is just fantastic. It really makes the job of inspection less busy work and more focusing on the actual project. When they're going around trying to figure out who's got what pieces of equipment and everything, they're not looking at the plans as much, and they're not looking at the details. So by simplifying some of the activities, it allows them to focus on the things that we really need them to do, which is like check grades, check construction quality, as opposed to just seeing who's there. So it really simplifies the required tasks and makes it easier to do the more important stuff.
So definitely tying into that streamlining effect that seems to be the common theme of using the system and using systems like APIA. Peter, how about you as an end user on a project? What kind of advantages have you found APIA to have, from the project level?
One of the big ones, I think, as mentioned before, is just the global access. You can just review things or write things from anywhere. And from a reviewer's point of reference, I guess, just the queries. When you're reviewing the DWR as opposed to the paper system, now you're not looking into another volume for the computation that's the backup, or the photo or whatever else backup documentation. It's all in one location, and the report itself contains links to any other uploaded computations or documents. So there's a real quick link. Or at the end of the month, the queries are fairly intuitive. You can get your list of all the items they worked on at a month, and each item also will have a link to the daily reports that paid for those items, so you can really quickly verify something. If you're looking at a monthly quantity, it's easy to verify that by checking all the comps and the reports. So I think those are some big benefits. And at the end of the day, if you want a paper copy, I mean, the format that APIA prints them in is very clean and is very easy to read. So just right there, I think it reduces the stress levels in my head when you're not trying to find information. It's all in a clearly readable format. And, you know, that's my opinion on that. So,
Yeah, and that's something that I'm glad you brought up, Peter, because that's one of the I think not only benefits of Appia, but an advantage over other systems that are similar is the fact that Appia has such robust, not only query ability and the query builder that's built into it, along with the standard reports that have been built in, but the ability to search by keyword, by item number, really by anything, and have it bring up anything that word or that item number description is associated with, be it DWRs, payments, change orders, whatever. It's pretty robust in that way. Brian, just coming to you on that, I know you've already kind of given us a couple of advantages, especially like you said, the ability to execute your job remotely and still be able to do things like check in on the job, see what's going on without having to drive out there. Any other advantages that you can think of that come to mind with using Appia?
Well, I mean, the main thing that we do is we make sure everybody gets paid. You know, if the contractor's not getting paid, contractor's not working. So the job that we're working on now, it's, you know, I just got a 32-page invoice yesterday that we've got over 250 pay items on this project. Just having the Appia generated invoice where you can track all of your quantities, you know when you're approaching your 100%, you know when you're running low on an item. You know, there's the readability. You know, we still got contractors who give us, you know, the handwritten AIA forms and the handwritten spreadsheets, and you're trying to look at it, you're trying to verify the numbers, and sometimes the math doesn't even add up right. You know, the contractor pushes a button, he generates an invoice. The contractor's already been tracking what he's doing, so you know we get the invoice approved from the consultant to the contractor usually in about 4 hours. They turn around, they submit it to me, I can look right at it and I see what's there. So the process of getting everybody paid is a lot quicker now than it is, you know, previously.
Yeah, so fidelity of the data and transparency of that data and the ability to kind of, as you're saying, to manipulate it, report on it quickly, and verify that what the contractor's presenting, if you're getting his forms, is what you have in Appia is in having that trust factor that the fidelity is there is another key advantage.
And there's also there's the reminder of, you know, certain testing that needs to be required. You know, if you're paying for concrete and you don't have your testing back, you know, it'll remind you, you know, we don't have the testing yet. So you don't accidentally pay something that you shouldn't have because, you know, you forgot that they didn't give you a cert on it or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, and that cuts to, you know, we talked about risks earlier, that cuts to things too, like having disagreements between the contractor and, say, the project, right? If everybody's kind of on the same page from the get-go, then it reduces the propensity for there to be, you know, well, I had this and you have that type situations that can lead to, at the worst claims, but at the least disagreements. And I think, you know, from having worked with you guys on this project and other projects, typically a contractor who's on board with a project team where everybody has good communication, which Appia is certainly an important tool for communication as well. And everyone understands, you know, how the data is being tracked, what the data is from the get-go, certainly makes for a project that flows a lot easier and moves a lot easier because everybody is on the same page from the beginning. So,
I mean, on a long-term project like this, you want your contractor to be happy, and your contractor's happy when he gets paid on time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, kind of in that same vein, I'll just move to another question I have for the panel. And I'm actually going to start with Howard on this one. And that is, you know, when you guys implemented Appia, how did you see transparency and access for other stakeholders, both in the project and out of the project improve by using Appia? And I use that kind of contractor example that Brian just brought up. You know, that's kind of a transparency improvement from the contractor. Other thoughts around transparency and access for other stakeholders?
So the first project we did this on was a lot zip project, and it was this was the project we actually got a grant from the state to administer. I think we received a grant for 2 licenses and some tablets. So you know the whole purpose of the pilot was to see if we could use e-construction to make the project easier. Um, the great thing about this was invoicing was perfectly transparent because the construction inspector had all of his quantities in Appia already. So the contractor knew exactly what the billing should have been. There was no negotiation. There was no surprises about, you know, we're going to come in really high. We're going to come in really low. At the end of every day, they indicated what was going into Appia. So they were all essentially in agreement on it. You know, on a regular construction project, sometimes those things are kind of kept to the side. The inspector keeps his quantities, the contractor keeps his, and then at the end of the month, there's a big mess as to who's got what. But Appia, with its daily entry, makes everything completely transparent. And then obviously we had another stakeholder, the DOT, on this project. So one of the benefits was that, you know, the entire project was out in the open. You know, they could log in at any time and see what was going on in the project. You know, they could look at photos, they could look at everything. So I think the transparency aspect of you know, just the quantities, and this is my daily report, and you know, I've been on construction projects. We never shared our daily reports with the contractor. It was ours, and it went into our system, and then we knew our numbers, and the contractor had theirs. Here, everybody's working in the same system.
Yeah, very valid points, and a good follow on to what Brian was talking about transparency at the contractor level. So now we have transparency at, you know, the state stakeholder level, as well as, you know, other stakeholders. Brian, you know, is there value, or have you seen value for other stakeholders that are in City Hall, be it, you know, say like the finance director and their ability to log in and kind of see where the funding and the financials stand, and kind of Appia's ability to give other parties that typically might not have direct involvement in a project like that, but ancillary involvement? Is there benefits to those folks being able to have transparency and access?
Well, I mean, our finance department generally doesn't get into the weeds like we do as far as what's going on day to day on the project. They're only looking at the deliverable that's coming into them, and having the invoices come in. They get the same invoice. All the information that they need is on there. The purchase order number, the job number, the bid number, you know, what the total cost was, how many change orders there have been, what the total amount of the change order. All that stuff is printed right there on the summary sheet. So they don't have to dive through a 30-page invoice to find something that they're looking for, because basically all the information they need comes in on page 1.
Yeah, so almost like like a stone in a still pond, right? These ripple effects that we see from, you know, direct project personnel to, you know, the next layer of personnel or the next ring of personnel, who might be like the finance department or say the town executive, and then maybe a further ring out to the state or the federal government if there's federal money in it. Appia has a way of magnifying, it seems, that effect of, you know, streamlining everybody's position, you know, in some form or fashion. It can be great at the project level, but it seems it can also have, you know, some maybe minimal effects at the outer rings, but there's still effects that cumulatively add up to more efficient use of time and money for all the parties involved. And at the end of the day, I think that's, you know, that's really important when we look at, you know, transportation funding and, you know, the state of infrastructure, both statewide and nationwide, and just being able to do more with what we have. Coming back to Howard for a minute, Howard, you know, you were a leader, you know, thought leader, forward thinking on the use of Appy, and I know in our discussions you've talked to me about Meriden doing some of its in-house kind of paving and repaving programs and using Appia. You told me at one point in time that you sort of were using it almost as an asset management type system as well. Can you explain a little bit about that kind of alternative use of Appia that, may not be apparent to a person watching today about direct project use?
Yeah, one of the things that we realize is we have a lot of smaller quantity projects. It's, we're paving, it's 2 items, but it's, $3 million. We have a sidewalk project that's, once again, 3 or 4 items, but, a couple $100,000. Crack seal, you can do this for, once again, the project documentation is huge. And then, quantities, our inspector knows what the quantities are. We get the invoices. We're in the office, we're going around, we're troubleshooting, but we're not taking tickets. We're not measuring quantities. It makes the processing of invoices much easier, even for these smaller quantity projects, if it's done in Appia. And it's, once again, it's very easy to use. It's there's no importing of items if you have 3 items. You just kind of put your items in, you track them, you go, you take some photos, you can document when the work was done. People tend to call up and complain about our work, or our work has caused damage, or there's a crash issue, or having the photo documentation right there when it happens is huge, especially on paving. So I think it really has some unexplored capabilities as just any contract that you have going out, just pop a project in Appia, take your photos, and now you have the same record keeping that you have on large projects. I mean, there's no reason to keep 2 separate record keeping systems for the big projects and the small projects. Anything that you have a contractor doing, just document and keep it as a little project in Appia.
Yeah, that's a great point. And in sense, even probably you've used it last with your move over to Middletown, but even just this past fall, it's been enhanced where end users, inspectors can now actually take photos in the field and mark those photos up in real time. So that's another enhancement that is a way where we continue to kind of push and add tools to Appia's capability, that just further brings more value to the end user. Just touching on that for a minute, Brian, what's the value, even in small projects, of having the ability to document things like through photograph, through basic DWR, and that searchable capability? If down the road, say in a year, you discover that some of the work was deficient, or a sidewalk suddenly cracks in an area that it wasn't expected to, or you have, say, delamination in an area of pavement, is there value in being able to have access to not only the photos from the time it was done, but the ability to quickly get in there and look and see if there's anything in the DWR data from your own inspectors about the time frame from when that pavement was put down?
Well, I mean, as an example, like you said, if for a sidewalk, if you end up with some poor quality concrete or something like that, okay, you look back and say, okay, when did we pour this section? Okay, we poured this on August 10th at 2:00 in the afternoon. It was 95 degrees out, and yeah, okay, just by looking at that, you can say, okay, it probably dried out too quickly. It set up too quickly before they got it finished properly. They had to keep re-wetting it to get it finished. And that's, you can look at that and you can make some inferences as to what the possible cause can be.
Yes.
Just looking at the conditions that were present when this was constructed, a lot of times can tell you what the potential problem was.
Right. So not just a repository for daily work reports, but the ability to go in, search that data, find that data, and research that data in a way that's efficient, and not having to, say, go into boxes or go into binders, as Peter alluded to earlier, and search through, even on a small job, say with just a a city inspector that might just be a sidewalk job paid with bond funds, not having to sit there and sift through all of those DWRs looking for the particulars, but the ability to search that quickly and get answers to be able to make inferences based on that data.
Yeah, another potential is the homeowner claim. You know, every job we do, somebody calls us up and says, okay, you broke something. You broke my wall, you broke my fence, you broke this, you broke my mailbox. My retaining wall was in perfect condition until you guys showed up. Now it's a mess. Well, you know what? You go back, you look at the photos of the day we got this site, and you know the wall was a mess then.
I got a call yesterday, Brian. 5.5 inches of rain in Durham. I milled and paved. Woman blamed her basement flooding on my milling and paving.
Yeah, we certainly have all been there, and that's a really good point, Brian. You know, again, the ability to document and go back and search things out when you get those complaints and those calls really makes it a lot easier. And again, I think that ties back to just risk reduction. You know, it's another avenue of risk reduction for projects, for owners, for the end users that really brings value through the use of the Appia system. So I just have, one of the questions for the panel here then, and that is, what's next? Where do you guys see the evolution of systems like Appia going? Or maybe to rephrase that, what do you think would be most beneficial to you in the future for these systems like Appia to be able to do? And I'll start with you, Brian.
Just the ability to document everything real time. The amount of time that it takes, like you said earlier, you're doing a paving job. You guys out, schlepping asphalt for 11 hours. The last thing he wants to do is go back and sit in the office for 2 hours at the end of the day and write up his paperwork. You pull out your phone or your tablet and you're making your notes as you go during the field. Okay, we're waiting for the next truck to come. You pull out your tablet and you put down what you do. You enter your records, how many tons you've done so far, and all that stuff gets entered automatically, and the contractor sees it. The other inspectors see it. I mean, one of the things that you really don't think about a lot is the document library. Job like the one that we have, it's been a 20-month job. We've had people are cycling in and out. All right, we're pouring concrete today. What's the specs on this concrete? Oh, I don't know. There's 5 different concrete mixes on this job. Which one are we using? Bing, bing, bing. You pop it up. You figure out exactly what's supposed to be there. You got your specs. You got 2 to 4 slump, 7.5% air. 4,500 PSI concrete. You got all your specs right there in your phone. You don't have to go back to the office and look through things. You don't have to spend 2 hours pouring through plans and specs before you get out there in order to prepare yourself for what you're going to be doing one day, and then you're never going back to the job again.
Yeah, it's a good point, Brian. There's been some recent upgrades to Appia as well with the Doc Express document controls software as a service that it comes with as well. And those upgrades recently has been more integration between the two products to where you can push things like payments and change orders out for signature essentially and approval through workflows using the Doc Express service versus just having them be in Appia and having to rely on some level of a paper process still to create an approval. And that's been an enhancement that we heard that was asked for by end users and owners like yourself. So let me ask Howard the same question. What do you see, Howard, as what's next? Where do you think this is going, could go, or what would be most beneficial to you as kind of an enhancement?
Having every consultant we work with essentially say this is our software, or essentially it's easier for us to have this just become commonplace. It's still a little bit unique. If either convincing all the municipalities to do it, because it's still a sell everywhere. You need buy-in to have everybody utilize this, because it is now just another piece of software we have to use. And I think there is going to be, there's software fatigue. we've got 30 different pieces of software that I have to use just to get a purchase order issued here. Having another piece of software becomes a challenge. So it almost has to become ubiquitous, or it's going to be another piece of software that somebody doesn't want to have to use because everything they're doing is software based. And
Sure.
I mean, it should be, this is the one activity that probably should be software based. But the concern is it's going to, we're probably approaching software overload.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was probably driven by everything going digital during the pandemic, right? It didn't happen over a short period of time. It was very intensive, and suddenly people went from doing things in person on paper to by screen, as we are today, in a digital format. And that, I think, you bring up a good point there, that there's fatigue around the software, but I do like what you said about buy-in on this software being the one that probably is needed for projects, and further expanding use by other parties. I'll wrap this piece up by giving Peter an opportunity as an end user to answer the same question. Pete, where do you see the use of a system like this going, and what kind of enhancements do you think would be most beneficial for you?
I'd like to see it on the municipally administered projects, or more of them. Up here in Connecticut, the MSAT projects, they still require the paper records, and it would benefit them, especially now with DOT is understaffed. If they have to come out to a job all the time, or if they can just review the records from their desktop up in Newington or wherever. So that would be big. Along the lines of what Brian and Howard said, there is some software fatigue, and what I like about Appia right now is it's user friendly. You don't have all kinds of menus that you need to dig deep to find something. Keep it simple, okay? If it stays simple like that, yeah, we need some enhancements here and there to make things a little efficient. But it's nice and simple and easy to use. And the other thing is, at least in Connecticut, I don't know if other states are doing it or what they're doing, but it looks like for the big DOT projects now, they're turning to or starting to shift to, like for paving days, or concrete too, I guess, but especially paving days. You're out there and you get 50 trucks a day. They're going to electronic tickets now, so that's even something that could be easily. I think as Brian had mentioned it, the inspectors are out there, you catch a break between trucks, but hey, if we get electronic tickets now, put all our notes on there, temp, thickness, location, and now it's in the report already instead of writing things down on a paper ticket. So, I mean, I don't know where that is, but that could be a good enhancement.
Yeah, that's a really good feedback, Peter. And that is something that Infotech has done at the DOT level through products that we create for ASHTO. Is e-ticketing, but it's certainly good feedback. That's a great example of an enhancement that could be brought to Appia, probably with very low overhead. That would certainly make a difference, as you're saying, for you at the project end.
Yep.
So sorry, just before I kind of wrap up this this question or this panel discussion, I wanted to touch on one other thing, and that is how Appia utilizes integration and kind of the future, where Appia can be going with integrations and looking to the future. Currently we have an integration with RTK units. That is something new that we've been rolling out, where inspectors can further be equipped to do more in that same time period and return more value simply by using land survey GNSS rovers that are geo-enabled to locate assets as they're being placed. So in real time with real geo information, latitude, longitude, or northings and eastings and elevations. And that system is built so that as the assets are being placed, and it could be anything from physical assets that we think of that are above grade, like guide rail and signs, or pavement curbing, to even the gravels that are in flexible pavement design. To be able to locate those and feed those into Appia for the purposes of computation for payment, for volumes, for areas, for linear footages. But then that asset information can also be pushed out to Esri ArcGIS systems for owners and end users that have Esri-based asset management systems to be able to use. So that's something that's out now that we're really excited about. We've rolled that out this fall, and so far it's getting a lot of attention and a lot of good feedback about that use. The other things that we talk about are the use of UAS photogrammetry, orthophoto mosaics, and LiDAR scanning, and the ability to incorporate large data sets into Appia in a way where those data sets work toward kind of model as a legal document or model as a legal delivery system. We hear a lot in digital twins. So getting more into digital project delivery. In fact, I just heard yesterday that there is a state that we work with that is going to roll out its first project where instead of rolling out paper plans, they're going to be rolling out a model. The bid is going to be based on a model. The contractor is going to have access to a twin model to create their own sections or look at their own sections if they want, quantify their own amounts as they want as part of the bid. But then during the build process, the as-building function will be more of a as-is function, right? It'll be taking that digital model that was designed and creating a secondary twin that is of the model modifications as was built and as was placed. And that ties back into things like the use of RTK or the use of drones to quantify the changes in construction as construction is progressing on a real-time or near real-time basis. So really, really exciting time to be involved in construction and using these types of systems as we push further and further toward that full digital project delivery method and talking about things like federated data environments where we're pulling a lot of data together for future use. So, to the panel, Peter, Howard, Brian, thank you guys for your answers to those questions. We're going to get to our Q&A portion in just a moment. But before we do, I just want to recap a couple of those main points that we talked about. And that is that, the paper-based systems are inefficient. They've been around a long time. They were great as a starting point, but we're technology savvy now, and we're really looking to move those systems into the tech world. The software is safe, it's secure, it's backed up and cloud-based, and it is a single source of truth that provides a lot of transparency for different stakeholders at different levels. It helps with that transparency, communication, planning. All of those things are greatly increased through collaborative use of it as not only a documentation tool, but as a communication tool. And, the integration ability with things like GNSS, RTK units, and UAS use and all the other technologies we see coming down the road are just continuing to help shape a broader digital picture, digital delivery picture as we move forward. So with that, we're going to move into Q&A, and for the viewers, we're going to start today with a couple of poll questions that I'd like to have you guys answer, if you would. And these are anonymous, so feel free to answer however you will, and then in a minute we'll share out the results. The first question being, how likely would you be to utilize a system like Appia for projects, based on kind of what you've read and what you've seen here today and heard from current users, as well as how important is Appia's ability to be used on those federally funded projects, as Peter and Howard and Brian brought up, and its ability to be more widespread. How important is that piece to, maybe your decision making around whether you would implement Appia or a system like it? And then finally, we just ask you, to rank, which integration or frontier is kind of most important to you moving forward, whether it be UAS, whether it be scanning, digital, project delivery, or full asset lifecycle management in there. So if you guys can just pop your answers in there, we'll take a look at those and as we move on here. So moving into the question and answer section in here, I just want to take a look and see what kind of questions we've got in. And so the first question that I'm going to ask of the panel is, and this might be good to start with Howard, since it kind of cuts directly to what you were talking about earlier, is what was it like for you to get started with Appia? Kind of how long did it take? Who was involved, and how did you guys roll it out within the city?
We had a fairly complicated project. Multiple phases, multiple funding sources. I think the initial rollout was definitely a little bit challenging. Plus, we were also trying to get tablets on board. Definitely recommend starting smaller. Do a small project, learn how it works, and then try and get the small victories on it. Don't try to go with a complicated project with state and local and federal funding sources and reimbursement rates, and a project that's prone to a lot of change orders. And I think you definitely want to take baby steps working in. Just as managing a construction project is complicated, managing a construction project with software it's the same. It's streamlined, but it's still a complicated process. So understanding how each of the pieces work, I think, is probably the best way to go. But yeah, there was definitely a learning curve. Just as it is with any software package, the challenge with something like Appia is there's a smaller community of practice. So finding answers meant you had to go with somebody at Appia. You didn't have a peer network to really utilize yet.
Yeah, so just following up on that, when you're making a change like this, Howard, is there any tips that you can give us, or was there anyone that was resistant to this, and kind of how did you tackle that?
Well, obviously the construction you have to get buy-in from whoever's doing your construction inspection. But that's why I definitely recommend doing a small in-house project first, and just understanding. We were learning at the same time as a consultant, which was somewhat challenging.
Yep.
You either want the consultant that knows how to do it and can share with you, or you have to know how to do it and share with them. Having both of you on the same learning curve at the same time was definitely a challenge. We had a lot of training sessions, and every training session was something new. And no matter what, no matter how well taught, somebody's going to screw something up.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's another enhancement area that we're making, which is looking at kind of a hybridized model for our learning and onboarding, right? When you implemented Appia, it was very much our traditional way of, as you said, having a lot of hours and time going through one-on-one with you. And we've recently heard from feedback from our customers that having the ability to look back, right, modules to go back to, or libraries to go back to, are important. You think about people implementing a software like this, even on a small project, let's say, we could teach you up front about how to do something like performing change orders in the system, which is certainly a key piece of it. But the reality is you may not need that functionality until a couple of months down the road, when the first change order might come along, or maybe it's the final change order if the project goes well, just to balance items, but you may not necessarily remember how to do those things at that point. So having the ability to have an easy source for look back, combined with the onboarding training that we do provide and we've always provided, has been something that's really been a piece that people have been talking about. So, well, listen, that's all the time we've got for questions today. We are nearing the noon hour, and I want to remind everybody that for the questions and poll questions we didn't get to, there will be a QA sheet that goes out later. And again, along with the recording of this webinar. Before we wrap things up, though, I would like to share something exciting, and that is Infotech will be holding our second annual eMERGE conference. Sorry, the eMERGE conference is our annual construction technology conference. It's free. It is a one-day conference with PDHs available where you will virtually explore more emerging technologies similar to Appia and things that we've talked about with integrations today, and ideas that are driving industry conversations right now, covering topics like GIS, asset management, digital project delivery, open data standards and federated data environments, cybersecurity, and more. Attendees can earn your PDH hours, and you'll have the ability to network with other industry professionals from all over the US. I was a panelist before coming to Infotech last year on this. I'll be a panelist again this year. It's a fantastic conference, and eMERGE registration is now open. So you can visit the URL that's there on the slide to get more information or sign yourself up. And that's it for today. So thank you again to the panel, to everyone for joining us, the viewers. Thank you for your time, the sharing of knowledge from the panelists, and your experiences utilizing Appia. We really do appreciate it. If you are ready to explore how Appia can work for you, or you have more questions, find out how. Grab that link, infotechinc.com/Appia, and feel free to reach out and contact us about it. And with that, have a great afternoon, everyone.